On October 2021, in a quiet subdivision on the east side of the city, I noticed my daughter-in-law had started collecting our mail before we woke up. It was a small thing. Our gate creaked at 6:15 in the morning. I heard her slippers on the tiles, and by breakfast the bank envelopes were already stacked, neatly opened, beside my coffee mug. I remember the smell of pan and rice and the humming of the old refrigerator while she explained that online statements are safer now, that we should switch everything. At the time, I thought she was being helpful. By then my husband and I had been married 33 years, and our son had been with her for almost a decade. Looking back, that morning was the first red flag I chose to file under kindness. I didn't know then that within months, $750,000 we had spent 3 decades building would be transferred out of our names, signed away under documents I thought were for insurance claims. I didn't know that my son would be copied on every email. And I didn't know that the woman opening our mail at dawn was not protecting us. She was preparing. Maria Navarro was 56 years old when the truth finally arrived, delivered not through confession or argument, but through an email thread left open on a desktop computer in a spare room. But that discovery was still months away. The story began years earlier, on a Sunday in late March 2014, when the air was thick and the electric fan in the Navarro dining room barely moved the heat. The house in Quezon City was small but solid, the kind built in the 1970s with thick walls and tile floors that stayed cool even in summer. Leo Navarro had run his accounting practice from a converted bedroom for nearly 20 years, keeping ledgers by hand long after his colleagues had switched to software. Maria had worked her way up from ward clerk to administrative supervisor at a private hospital, managing schedules, budgets, and staff complaints with the same patient attention she brought to everything else. They were comfortable in the way people are when they have worked for every single thing they own, when each piece of furniture represents a specific paycheck, when even the dishes stacked in the drainer carry the memory of careful shopping and comparison. David, their only son, had called the night before to say he was bringing someone for lunch. Someone important. Maria made adobo, the way she always did when something mattered, browning the chicken slowly and letting the vinegar balance against the soy sauce until the kitchen smelled like every Sunday of David's childhood. Leo set the table with their good plates, the ones with the faint gold trim that had survived 3 decades of use. Hannah Cruz arrived just after noon, stepping through the doorway in a crisp white blouse and tailored trousers, her hair pulled back in a way that looked both effortless and expensive. She was 30 years old, a real estate broker, and she moved through the small house with the confidence of someone used to evaluating spaces quickly. David watched her with the particular brightness men get when they have already decided, when the introduction is a formality rather than a test. They sat at the table, and Maria served the food in silence, the way she had learned to do years ago, letting the meal speak first. Hannah complimented everything, her tone warm and easy, and for the first few minutes the conversation stayed light. "Where did you grow up? What does your family do?" The usual questions, traded back and forth across plates of rice and chicken. Then Hannah leaned forward slightly and asked about the house. Not in the way guests usually do, with polite curiosity about the neighborhood or the garden. She asked about the title, about when it had been purchased, about whether they had considered refinancing or leveraging the equity. She used those words exactly. Leveraging the equity. As if the walls around them were not walls but instruments, tools that could be moved and multiplied. Leo laughed, the kind of laugh that was half amusement and half deflection. "We are old school," he said. "We bought it outright in '89. No mortgages." Hannah nodded, but her expression shifted slightly, the way it does when someone hears information they find interesting. She asked how much the neighborhood had appreciated since then. She asked if they had thought about diversifying their assets. She mentioned something about property flipping and how the market had changed in the past decade, how people their age were sitting on value they didn't even realize. Maria watched her son's face as Hannah spoke. He was smiling, proud, as if his girlfriend's fluency with money was a reflection of his own good judgment. Leo answered some of the questions, deflected others with jokes about being too tired to start over. But Maria said very little. She was listening to the way Hannah talked, not just about money but about their lives, as if 33 years of work and saving and careful planning were simply underutilized assets waiting to be optimized. At some point during dessert, Hannah turned to Maria and asked about their retirement plans. "Have you thought about estate planning?" she said. "A lot of people wait too long. Lawyers charge so much more when it becomes urgent." Maria set down her spoon slowly. "We manage," she said. "Slowly but surely." Hannah smiled. "Of course," she said. "But you are sitting on equity. With the right structure, this could work harder for you." David reached for more rice, his tone light. "Hannah is good with these things," he said. "She helps her clients set this stuff up all the time." The conversation moved on, shifting to safer topics, lighter stories. But Maria kept hearing that phrase in her head. Sitting on equity. As if she and Leo were simply occupying space that rightfully belonged to someone else's plan. By the time Hannah and David left, the sun was low and the air was cooling. Maria stood at the doorway and watched them walk to the car, Hannah's hand resting lightly on David's arm. Leo came up beside her, still smiling. "She seems sharp," he said. Maria nodded. "She does." But she did not say what she was thinking, which was that Hannah had spent the entire lunch inventorying their lives, mapping out assets and timelines, asking questions that sounded like care but felt like an audit. She did not say it because she had no language for it yet, no framework to name what she had just witnessed. So she filed it away under a heading she did not yet have a name for and went inside to wash the dishes. Over the next 18 months, Hannah became a steady presence in their lives. She and David announced their engagement in late 2015, and Maria tried to feel only joy. Tried to focus on the fact that her son was happy, that Hannah was capable and organized, that she treated David well. Tried not to notice the way Hannah's questions about their finances became more frequent, more specific, more insistent. By then, Hannah had begun asking about their investment accounts, their insurance policies, their will. She brought it up casually, over coffee or during car rides, but the questions always landed the same way. "Have you updated your beneficiaries? Do you have a family lawyer? What happens if something happens to Tita, Leo?" Leo would brush it off, say they had time, that they would get to it. But Hannah pressed gently, persistently, always framing it as concern. "You are not getting younger," she would say. "It is better to plan now than to leave David scrambling later." And, because it sounded like love, because it sounded like a daughter-in-law who cared, Maria let the questions continue. Let Hannah see their old passbooks, their insurance documents, their property titles. Let her take photos of account numbers, claiming she wanted to research better interest rates for them. The wedding took place in June 2017, a small ceremony at a garden venue near the city. Hannah managed every detail with the precision of someone who had done this professionally, which she had. She negotiated with vendors, tracked payments in color-coded spreadsheets, and handled reimbursements from relatives with such efficiency that by the end of the event, she had a surplus. She presented the leftover money to Maria and Leo with a printed summary, every peso accounted for. Maria looked at the document and felt something she could not name. Gratitude, yes, because Hannah had saved them stress. But also unease, because the summary was so thorough, so controlled, that it felt less like help and more like a demonstration. "Look what I can do with your money. Look how much better I am at this than you." After the wedding, Hannah's involvement deepened. She began handling small tasks for them. Renewing the house insurance. Paying the property tax online. Setting up a family Viber group where she posted reminders about bills and deadlines, summarizing everything in neat bullet points so that David would always know what his parents needed without having to ask them directly. "It is easier if everything goes through me," she said once, laughing lightly as she updated the insurance policy on her laptop. "That way David does not have to worry, and you do not have to remember so many passwords." Maria agreed because it did sound easier. Because she was tired, and Leo was tired, and Hannah seemed so confident, so competent. Because saying no would have required explaining a suspicion Maria was not sure she was allowed to have. By late 2018, Leo suffered a mild stroke. It happened on a Tuesday morning while he was reviewing tax files in his small office. Maria found him slumped in his chair, his speech slurred, his left hand weak. She called for an ambulance, then called David, then sat beside her husband in the back of the vehicle, holding his hand and praying in a way she had not prayed in years. Hannah arrived at the hospital before David did. She brought coffee, still hot, and a folder with Leo's medical history that she had somehow compiled from their old records. She spoke to the doctors calmly, asking about treatment plans and recovery timelines, taking notes in a small leather notebook. When David finally arrived, breathless and pale, Hannah briefed him quickly and efficiently, so that by the time he reached his parents, he already knew what the doctors had said. Maria was grateful. Deeply, genuinely grateful. Because in that moment of fear and exhaustion, Hannah had taken care of things. Had been the organized, capable presence they needed. But over the following weeks, as Leo recovered slowly, Hannah began using the stroke as leverage. She visited often, bringing groceries and helping Maria manage the household tasks Leo could no longer do easily. And during those visits, she began talking about consolidation. About simplifying their finances so that if something worse happened, David and she could step in quickly. "Ma," she would say, sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. "What if something worse happens? You should add David to your accounts. Just in case. We can set up a family corporation. It is more tax efficient." Maria hesitated. "We have managed fine so far," she said. Hannah smiled patiently. "Of course you have," she said. "But things are different now. Tito is not as strong. And you are carrying too much alone. Let us help." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like the kind of thing a good daughter-in-law would suggest. So Maria agreed to think about it, and Hannah left behind printouts explaining the benefits of joint accounts and family corporations, all neatly highlighted in yellow. By the time the pandemic started in March 2020, the world had narrowed to the same four walls, the same routines, the same quiet fear of illness. Maria and Leo stayed inside, ordering groceries online, attending virtual checkups with Leo's doctor, watching the news with a growing sense of helplessness. Hannah and David visited rarely, always masked, always keeping their distance, but Hannah continued to manage their affairs remotely. She handled their bills, renewed their subscriptions, filed their insurance claims. Every document went through her laptop, every payment through her email, every question through her careful filter. And gradually, without anyone announcing it, Hannah became the gatekeeper. The person who stood between Maria and Leo and their own financial lives. The person who received the statements, processed the renewals, consolidated the accounts. By mid-2021, Maria and Leo had one main investment account, one joint time deposit, and both had David listed as co-signatory. All statements had been switched to email. Hannah's email. All passwords were stored in a shared document that only Hannah and David could access. All of their financial life had been simplified, streamlined, optimized. Maria told herself this was modern. This was efficient. This was what families did now. She did not yet have the language to call it what it was. The day the truth started to surface was a Thursday in May 2021, unremarkable in every way except for what it revealed. The internet went down around mid-morning, the router blinking red no matter how many times Maria reset it. She needed to print a medical reimbursement form for one of Leo's recent checkups, something she usually asked Hannah to handle. But Hannah was out at a property site visit and not answering her phone, and Maria needed the form by the afternoon to submit it to their HMO. So she went to the spare room, the one that used to be David's bedroom, where an old desktop computer sat on a wooden desk covered in a thin layer of dust. David had left it there when he moved out, still functional but rarely used. Maria powered it on, waited for it to boot up, and opened the browser. She typed PhilHealth in the search bar, looking for the reimbursement form template. The search results loaded slowly, and as she scrolled down, her eyes caught on an email subject line just below the search box. Urgent liquidation of Navarro joint portfolio. Maria stopped scrolling. The email account was still logged in. David's account. She had not intended to look at his mail. Had not planned to search through anything. But the word liquidation sat on the screen like a foreign object, sharp and impossible to ignore. She clicked. The email thread opened a long chain of back-and-forth messages between Hannah, David, and someone named Armando Cruz, who signed his messages as senior investment manager at a bank Maria recognized. The most recent message was dated 3 weeks earlier. She scrolled to the top of the thread and began reading. From Hannah Navarro. Sent. April 23, 2021. Subject: Request for full portfolio liquidation. Good afternoon, Armando. Per our discussion last week, we are proceeding with the liquidation of the joint investment portfolio under the names of Leonardo Navarro and Maria Navarro. Please find attached the signed special power of attorney authorizing David Navarro and myself to act on their behalf. We would like to transfer the full balance to the new account we opened at Pacific Trust Bank last month. Please confirm the timeline for processing. Best, Hannah. Maria's hands went cold. She scrolled down. The next message was from Armando. From Armando Cruz. Sent. April 24, 2021. Subject: Request for full portfolio liquidation. Good afternoon, Hannah. I have reviewed the SBA and it appears to be in order. However, given the amount involved, I will need to confirm directly with Mr. and Mrs. Navarro that they understand the scope of this transaction. This is standard protocol for liquidations over $500,000. Please have them call me at their earliest convenience. Regards, Armando. Maria's chest tightened. $500,000. She kept reading. From Hannah Navarro. Sent. April 24, 2021. Subject: Request for full portfolio liquidation. Hi, Armando. I understand the protocol, but as I mentioned, Mr. Navarro recently had a stroke and is not managing these details actively anymore. That is precisely why they executed the SBA, so that David and I can handle urgent matters without burdening them with every small decision. The SBA grants us full authority, including liquidation and reinvestment. Please proceed as requested. If there are any compliance concerns, let me know and I can provide additional documentation. Thanks, Hannah. Maria read the message twice. Recently I had a stroke. Not managing these details actively. Every small decision. She scrolled further. From Armando Cruz. Sent. April 26, 2021. Subject: Request for full portfolio liquidation. Hannah, I have consulted with our compliance team and they have advised that we can proceed based on the SBA provided. Please confirm the receiving account details and I will initiate the transfer. The total portfolio value as of today is approximately $753,612, inclusive of accrued interest. The transfer will take 3 to 5 business days to complete. Best, Armando. Maria stopped breathing. $753,000. Their entire retirement fund. Built over 33 years. Transferred. She scrolled further, her fingers trembling slightly. From Hannah Navarro. Sent. April 27, 2021. Subject: Request for full portfolio liquidation. Perfect. The receiving account is Pacific Trust Bank, account number 047391208, under Navarro Holdings Incorporated. Please send confirmation once the transfer is complete. Thank you for your assistance. Hannah. Navarro Holdings Incorporated. Maria did not recognize the name. She scrolled to the attachments. There were 3 files. The first was the special power of attorney. She opened it. The document was 4 pages long, dense with legal language, but the key section was on page 2. I/we, Leonardo Santos Navarro and Maria Teresa Navarro, hereby appoint David Leonardo Navarro and Hannah Marie Cruz Navarro as our attorneys in fact, with full authority to act jointly and severally on our behalf in all financial matters, including but not limited to opening and closing accounts, transferring funds, liquidating investments, entering into contracts, and executing any documents necessary for the management of our financial affairs. Below the paragraph were 2 signatures, Maria's and Leo's. Beside each signature was a date, March 15, 2021. Maria stared at the screen. She remembered signing something in March. Hannah had come over on a Monday afternoon, 2 months after Leo's second stroke, which had been quieter than the first, leaving him more tired than impaired. Hannah had stood at the dining table with a stack of papers clipped together, her tone brisk and efficient. "Ma, these are just for the HMO and some investment rollovers," she had said. Tito June prepared them. "It is all standard. No big changes." Tito June was June Salazar, a lawyer Hannah knew from her real estate work. Maria had never met him. She had asked to read the documents, but Hannah had smiled and said there was no need, that it was all routine, that she and David had already reviewed everything. And because Leo was resting in the bedroom, and because Maria was tired, and because she trusted Hannah, she had signed. Signed next to Leo's signature, which Hannah said she had gotten earlier that morning. Signed without reading every page. Signed because saying no would have required energy she did not have. Maria closed the SBA and opened the second attachment. It was an email from Hannah to David, dated April 10, 2021, 2 weeks before the liquidation request. Subject: Plan for Migration Fund. David, I have been looking at the timeline for our visa application, and we need to show proof of funds by July at the latest. The fastest way to do this is to consolidate your parents' investments into the new company account we set up. Once the funds are under Navarro Holdings, we can use them as capital for the investor visa category. I know this feels aggressive, but we have been talking about moving abroad for 3 years now, and we cannot keep waiting. They will not understand the urgency. I will just handle the paperwork. Let me know if you have any concerns. Maria read the message again. Migration Fund. Investor visa. They will not understand. I will just handle the paperwork. She opened the third attachment. It was a certificate of incorporation for Navarro Holdings Inc., registered in February 2021. The listed officers were David Leonardo Navarro, President, and Hannah Marie Cruz Navarro, Treasurer. There was no mention of Leonardo or Maria Navarro. Maria sat back in the chair. The fan in the spare room hummed quietly. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice, then stopped. The sound of traffic drifted through the window, ordinary and distant. She closed the email thread. She did not delete it. She did not forward it to herself. Not yet. She simply closed it, shut down the computer, and sat in the silent room for a long time. Then she stood, walked to the kitchen, and filled the kettle. She set it on the stove and turned on the flame. While the water heated, she opened the drawer where they kept old receipts and pulled out a cheap spiral notebook she had bought months ago for grocery lists, but never used. She sat at the kitchen table, clicked open a pen, and wrote the date at the top of the first page. May 20, 2021. Below it, she wrote, "Email found. Liquidation confirmed. $753,612. Transferred to Navarro Holdings Incorporated. David and Hannah, officers. SBA signed March 15. She wrote slowly, carefully, as if each word was evidence. Which it was. By the time the kettle whistled, Maria had filled half a page. She made herself coffee, black and bitter, and sat at the table drinking it while the afternoon light shifted across the tiles. Leo was asleep in the bedroom, the sound of his breathing faint and steady through the wall. The house was quiet. And Maria knew 3 things. The money they had spent 3 decades building was no longer under their names. Her son had been copied on every single email. Nothing about this was a misunderstanding. That night, Maria did not tell Leo what she had found. She did not call David. She did not confront Hannah. She simply went through the evening as she always did, cooking dinner, watching the news, helping Leo to bed. She moved through the routines with the same calm precision she had brought to 30 years of hospital administration, where the most critical decisions were often made in silence, where panic was a luxury no one could afford. After Leo fell asleep, Maria returned to the kitchen and opened the old metal lockbox they kept in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It was dusty, the hinges stiff, but it still locked. Inside were the documents they had not digitized. Old passbooks, paper contracts, deed photocopies, insurance policies from the 80s and 90s. Things Hannah had never asked to see because she had assumed everything important was already online. Maria pulled out every document, one by one, and laid them across the kitchen table. Then she took out her phone, the old model David had bought her 2 years ago that she barely knew how to use beyond calls and messages, and opened the camera. She photographed every page. Account numbers, signatures, dates, terms, beneficiaries. She photographed the covers, the stamps, the handwritten notes in the margins. She worked slowly, methodically, making sure each image was clear. When she finished, she had 93 photos. She put the documents back in the lockbox, returned it to the drawer, and went to bed. She did not sleep much. But she also did not cry. There would be time for grief later. Tonight was for gathering facts. Over the following weeks, Maria built her case in silence. She returned to the desktop computer in the spare room several times, always in the mornings when Leo was resting and Hannah was out. She learned how to navigate David's email, how to search by keyword, and how to download attachments. She created a new email account under a name no one would recognize. Lord Cruz. A common name, borrowed from a neighbor who had passed away years ago. She forwarded key emails to that account, carefully deleting the forwarded message from David's sent folder so there would be no trace. She learned about Navarro Holdings Inc. by searching public databases. The company had been incorporated in February 2021, listing David and Hannah as the primary officers and shareholders. Its stated purpose was investment management and asset holding. It had no website, no listed address beyond a box, no employees. It was a shell. A vehicle designed to hold their money while appearing, on paper, to belong to David and Hannah. Maria also began testing boundaries. When Hannah came over one Saturday in June and suggested they convert the title of the house into the new family corporation for tax efficiency, Maria smiled and said she would think about it. No. Just let us think about it after Christmas. Hannah's face tightened for half a second before she recovered. Of course, Ma, she said. Just do not wait too long. There are new regulations coming next year. Urgency. Always urgent. Maria noted it in her notebook. June 12. Hannah pushed for house title transfer. Claimed new regulations. Did not specify which regulations. She started declining to sign anything without reading it first. When Hannah brought over a document related to their car insurance, Maria picked it up and said she would take it to her room to review. It is just a renewal, Ma, Hannah said, her smile strained. Same terms as last year. Maria nodded. I know, she said. But I want to read it myself. She saw the flicker of irritation in Hannah's eyes, quickly masked. And she understood something then. Hannah was not used to being questioned. Not by them. Not anymore. In early July, Maria made an appointment with a lawyer. Not June Salazar, Hannah's contact, but someone recommended by a former colleague at the hospital. Attorney Ramon de la Cruz ran a small practice near City Hall, specializing in estate planning and elder law. His office was on the second floor of an old building, accessed by narrow stairs, the walls lined with filing cabinets and faded legal posters. Maria brought photocopies only. Never the originals. She sat across from Attorney Ramon's desk, which was cluttered with folders and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Lawyer," and told him everything in a flat, factual voice. She handed him the printed emails, the incorporation documents, the SBA, the bank transfer confirmations. She explained how the documents had been presented, what she had been told, what she had signed. Attorney. Ramon read in silence for 20 minutes, occasionally making notes on a yellow pad. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Mrs. Navarro, he said, this is a difficult situation. Legally, you did grant them authority. The SBA is valid on its face. But there are angles we can pursue. Especially if there was misrepresentation about what you were signing. Can we get the money back? Maria asked. Attorney Ramon hesitated. Maybe, he said. Possibly. But it will take time, and it will be expensive, and there are no guarantees. What you have right now, though, is something more valuable. What is that? They do not know that you know. Maria looked at him. He continued. Right now they think you are unaware. That gives you time. Time to document everything, time to build a timeline, time to prepare a case without them destroying evidence or moving assets further. Do not confront them yet. Keep gathering. Keep observing. When the time is right, we file everything at once. Maria nodded slowly. How long do I have? As long as you can stay quiet. She stayed quiet for 3 months. During that time, she became someone she barely recognized. On the surface, she was the same Maria. She cooked, she cleaned, she attended to Leo's medical appointments. She smiled at Hannah's suggestions and thanked her for her help. But underneath, she was building a case. She returned to the email account regularly, downloading new messages as they appeared. In late July, she found an email where Hannah wrote to David about their visa application, mentioning that they needed to keep the parents comfortable until the funds cleared and the migration process was finalized. In August, there was a thread about selling the house once they were abroad, estimating its value and discussing how to convince Maria and Leo to move into a smaller condo. Maria read these emails in the dim light of the spare room, her face expressionless, and copied them into her hidden archive. She also began creating a detailed timeline in her notebook. Every significant event, every document, every statement from the past 5 years. She noted the dates of Leo's strokes, the medications he was taking that affected his cognition, the times Hannah had pressed for financial changes. She wrote down exact quotes from conversations, as close as she could remember them. She recorded the dates when documents had been signed, when statements had been switched to digital, when joint accounts had been opened. By September, her notebook was nearly full. She had over 200 screenshots and downloaded emails. She had photocopies of every financial document they still possessed. She had medical records showing Leo's condition at the time the SPA was signed. She had a timeline that stretched from March 2014, the first Sunday lunch with Hannah, to the present day. She had everything she needed to tell the story of what had happened. In October, Maria returned to Attorney Ramon's office. This time, she brought a flash drive with all the digital evidence organized into folders, and she brought the original notebook with the handwritten timeline. She sat across from him again and placed everything on his desk. I am ready, she said. Attorney Ramon reviewed the materials over the next 2 weeks. He called her twice to clarify details, to confirm dates, to ask about specific conversations. He drafted a lengthy affidavit, attaching every email, every screenshot, every document as exhibits. He highlighted the medical reports showing that Leo had been on cognitive-affecting medications at the time of the SPA signing. He noted the discrepancies between what Hannah had told them the documents were for and what they actually authorized. He pointed out the timeline showing how Hannah had systematically centralized control over their finances, step by step, year by year. On November 5, 2021, they filed 2 complaints. The first was a civil petition filed with the Regional Trial Court, challenging the validity of certain transactions executed under the SPA on the grounds of undue influence, misrepresentation, and lack of informed consent. The petition asked the court to void the transfer of funds, to freeze the assets held by Navarro Holdings Inc., and to restore the investment portfolio to Leonardo and Maria Navarro. The second was a complaint filed with the Professional Regulation Commission, Real Estate Service, outlining Hannah's role in what Maria's lawyers described as financial abuse of elderly persons, misuse of fiduciary authority, and unethical conduct in handling the financial affairs of her husband's parents. Both complaints were filed quietly, without warning, with copies served by registered mail. Maria did not call David to tell him, did not send a message to Hannah. She simply filed the papers and waited. The call came 2 days later on a Sunday evening. Maria was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when her phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. She dried her hands on a towel and answered. Ma, his voice was tight, controlled. What is this? What is what? Maria said calmly. These legal papers. These complaints. What are you doing? I am documenting what happened, Maria said. I am putting everything on record. There was a pause. She heard Hannah's voice in the background, sharp and urgent, though she could not make out the words. You are ruining us, David said. Do you understand that? You are destroying everything. Maria looked at the pot of soup on the stove, steam rising steadily. No, David, she said quietly. I am describing what already happened. "We did not steal from you," David said, his voice rising slightly. "We were helping. We were planning for your future. For everyone's future. You signed the documents. You gave us authority to handle insurance claims," Maria said. "That is what Hannah told me. That is what I thought I was signing." "You should have read it," David said. "You are right," Maria said. "I should have. That is my mistake. But it does not change what you did with that authority." There was a long silence. Then David spoke again, his voice colder. "Hannah wants to talk to you. Tell Hannah I have nothing to say to her that is not already in writing. Ma, you do not understand what this is going to do to us. Her license, our visa application, everything we have been working toward. You are going to ruin it." Maria closed her eyes briefly. "I am not ruining anything, David," she said. "I am drawing a line. This is where the taking stops." He hung up. Maria set the phone down and returned to the stove. She stirred the soup slowly, watching the vegetables turn over in the broth. Leo called from the living room, asking if dinner was ready. She told him it would be just a few more minutes. She did not tell him about the call. She did not tell him about the complaints. Not yet. She would, eventually. But tonight, she simply served dinner and ate in silence, and when Leo asked if something was wrong, she said she was just tired. In the weeks that followed, Maria took one more step. She met with a different lawyer, someone Attorney Ramon recommended who specialized in estate planning. This lawyer, Attorney Grace Sisson, worked from a small office in a residential building, and she spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had seen every family configuration and every form of betrayal. Maria told her she wanted to rewrite her will. Attorney Grace listened, took notes, and then asked what Maria wanted to happen to her remaining assets when she died. Maria was silent for a moment. "I want them to go to my grandchildren," she said. "If David and Hannah ever have children. But I want those children to receive the assets directly, through a trust managed by a bank. Not by their parents." "So David would not inherit," Attorney Grace clarified. "He can inherit whatever is left after I die," Maria said. "But he will not control it. And he will not be the executor. I want someone independent to manage the distribution." Attorney Grace nodded and drafted the documents accordingly. The new will removed David as executor and primary heir. Instead, it established a trust funded by the house, a small parcel of land in Antipolo that Hannah had never known about, and the remaining savings account that had not been transferred. The trust named a corporate trustee and specified that distributions would be made only to any future grandchildren upon reaching the age of 25. Maria read the document 3 times before signing. When she finally did, on a Tuesday afternoon in late November, she felt something shift inside her. Not relief. Not victory. But a quiet certainty that she had done what she could to protect what remained. The legal proceedings moved slowly, as legal proceedings always do. By December, Hannah had hired her own lawyer, and the back and forth of motions and responses began. Hannah's position was that everything had been done legally, that Maria and Leo had full knowledge of what they were signing, that the SBA was valid and the transfers were authorized. Her lawyer submitted affidavits from Hannah and David describing how Maria had willingly agreed to consolidate the accounts, how she had often said she was too tired to manage everything, how she had repeatedly thanked Hannah for taking care of their affairs. Maria's lawyer countered with the medical records, the emails showing Hannah's discussions about migration funds and keeping the parents comfortable, the timeline showing how the requests for authority had escalated after each of Leo's strokes, and the testimony from Maria herself, calm and detailed, describing exactly how the documents had been presented and what she had been told they were for. The case was assigned to a judge, calendared for hearings, buried under the backlog of cases that clogged the courts. Maria was told it could take years. But the complaint with the Professional Regulation Commission moved faster. In January 2022, Hannah was summoned to appear before an investigative panel. She arrived with her lawyer, dressed in a business suit, her expression composed. The panel consisted of 3 senior professionals, and they had printouts of every email Maria's lawyers had submitted. Printouts of Hannah describing Maria and Leo as confused, as unable to manage their funds, as requiring someone to take over before they made poor decisions. Printouts of Hannah's correspondence about using their retirement money as capital for a visa application. Printouts of the timeline showing how she had systematically positioned herself as the sole gatekeeper of the Navarro family finances. The hearing lasted 4 hours. By the end, the panel informed Hannah that her license would be suspended pending further review, and that a formal ethics investigation would be opened. When Maria heard the news from attorney Ramon, she felt no satisfaction, only a kind of quiet acknowledgement. The record was now clear. The professional body that regulated Hannah's work had seen the same pattern Maria had seen, and they had acted. That suspension had consequences beyond the legal case. David and Hannah had been building their visa application around Hannah's credentials as a successful real estate professional. Without an active license, that pathway collapsed. Their investor visa application, which required proof of legitimate business income and professional standing, was rejected. Their plans to migrate, to start over abroad with the capital they had extracted from Maria and Leo, stalled. Maria learned this not from David, but from relatives. From an aunt who mentioned casually that David had seemed stressed lately. From a cousin who said she had heard Hannah was taking a break from work. From the family Viber group, which had gone mostly silent, except for occasional photos of meals at restaurants, new furniture, a weekend trip to the beach. Life continued for them. Just not the life they had planned. Maria stopped attending family gatherings. She stopped calling David unless it was necessary. She stopped pretending that the relationship could be repaired by time or by polite avoidance. She simply withdrew, cleanly and quietly, and focused on the life she still had. Leo's reaction was harder to parse. When Maria finally told him everything, showing him the emails and the documents and the timeline she had built, he sat at the dining table for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "He is still our son." "Yes," Maria said. "And these are still the facts." But Leo did not want to talk about the facts, did not want to confront David, did not want to participate in the legal case. He signed the affidavits attorney Ramon needed, provided the medical records, but beyond that, he retreated. He stopped asking Maria about the case, stopped bringing up David's name. He simply existed in the space between denial and acceptance, too tired to choose one fully. The distance between Maria and Leo widened gradually, not through arguments, but through silence. They had always been partners, always faced things together, but this was something Leo could not face. And Maria could not stop facing it. In February 2022, Maria moved her clothes into the spare room. She did not make an announcement. She did not pack a suitcase. She simply moved a few items each day, a blouse here, a pair of shoes there, until one morning Leo woke up and realized she was sleeping in a different room. He did not ask why. And she did not explain. By the time summer arrived, Maria had filed all the paperwork she needed to file, answered all the questions the lawyers needed answered, and provided all the evidence the case required. The rest was waiting. Waiting for hearings, waiting for rulings, waiting for the slow machinery of justice to process what had happened. She stopped waiting for the money to come back. She accepted that $753,000 was likely gone, absorbed into accounts and investments she would never see again. That acceptance was not defeated. It was simply recognizing reality. The case would establish the truth, create a record, and impose consequences. But it would not turn back time. Maria adjusted her life accordingly. She started buying cheaper brands at the grocery. She canceled subscriptions she did not need. She looked for a smaller, less expensive place to live, something she could manage on her pension and the small savings that remained. In August, she moved into a house her parents had left her in Antipolo, a modest place on a quiet street where the neighbors kept chickens and the corner store sold cigarettes one stick at a time. The house was smaller, simpler, and hers. No one else's name on the title. No joint accounts. No shared passwords. Just her name, her space, her control. She set up her documents in a fireproof box she bought from a hardware store, the kind meant for important papers. She kept 2 keys. one on a hook beside her bed, one in a safe deposit box at the bank. She labeled folders carefully. Medical records, property titles, financial statements, legal documents. Everything organized, everything accessible, everything under her direct control. She planted herbs on the small balcony. Basil, oregano, a row of sansevieria that required almost no care. She watered them every morning around 7:30, when the sun was still gentle, and she found a kind of peace in the routine. The plants did not ask questions, did not require explanations, did not judge. They simply grew or did not grow, depending on how well she cared for them. David called occasionally. Birthdays, holidays, when a relative was in the hospital. The conversations were brief, functional, devoid of warmth. How are you, Ma? I am fine. And you? Busy. We might visit soon. All right. Let me know. They never visited. Maria did not know if Hannah and David felt guilty. Did not know if they had convinced themselves that what they did was justified, that they had been helping, that Maria was overreacting. She suspected they told themselves a version of the story where they were the victims, where Maria's legal actions were the betrayal, where everything they did had been well-intentioned and misunderstood. It did not matter anymore. Their story was not hers to manage. By late 2023, Maria had settled into her new life. She woke early, made coffee, watered her plants. She attended a weekly mass at the small chapel near her house. She volunteered twice a month at a community center, helping organize medical missions for elderly residents. She spoke to old friends, made new acquaintances, and lived quietly. The court case was still ongoing, tangled in procedural delays and motions. Attorney Ramon updated her occasionally, but the updates were always the same. Still pending. Still waiting for the next hearing date. Still years away from resolution. Maria stopped asking. She had done what she needed to do. The record existed. The truth was documented. Whatever happened next would happen without her waiting for it. Leo remained in the old house in Quezon City. They spoke once a week, brief calls where they discussed practical things. His medications. The weather. Whether the roof needed repairs. They did not discuss David. Did not discuss the case. They had become roommates in spirit, even though they no longer shared a room. Maria did not regret the separation. Regret required believing there had been another option, and she was not sure there had been. She had needed to act, and Leo had needed not to act, and those two needs could not coexist in the same space. In December 2024, Maria turned 59. She spent her birthday alone, cooking a simple meal and watching the sun set from her balcony. She thought about her life. About the 33 years she had worked to build something stable, the 3 decades of careful saving and modest living and planning for a future that had been dismantled in a matter of months. She thought about the $753,000 she would probably never see again. She thought about her son and the woman he had married and the choices they had made. And she thought about the choices she had made in response. If someone had told her, back in March 2014, that meeting Hannah would lead to all of this, would she have done anything differently? Would she have been less welcoming, less trusting, less willing to let Hannah help? Maria was not sure. Because the problem was not that she had been kind. The problem was that Hannah had used that kindness as leverage. And there was no way to protect yourself from that except by being unkind from the start, which was a kind of loss in itself. So she let herself off the hook. She had done what any reasonable person would do. She had trusted her son's wife. She had believed that help was help. She had signed documents she should have read more carefully, yes, but she had signed them in good faith, without any reason to believe they were instruments of transfer rather than instruments of care. The mistake was human. The betrayal was not. As 2025 began, Maria continued her routines. She attended medical checkups, managed her small budget, kept her documents organized. She had no illusions about getting rich again. No plans to rebuild the savings that had been taken. She was 59, living on a pension, managing. And that was enough. One afternoon in late February, she received a call from Attorney Ramon. "Mrs. Navarro," he said, "I wanted to update you. The PRC has concluded its investigation into Hannah's conduct. They have issued a formal reprimand and extended the license suspension for an additional 2 years. She can reapply after that, but the reprimand will remain on her record permanently. Maria listened quietly. "What about the civil case?" she asked. "Still pending," he said. "But the PRC decision strengthens our position. It is now a matter of public record that her conduct was found to be unethical." "Will we ever get the money back?" Maria asked. Attorney Ramon hesitated. "Honestly," he said, "it is unlikely. Even if we win, enforcing the judgment will be difficult. But the case establishes what happened. It puts the truth on record. Sometimes that is the best we can do." Maria thanked him and hung up. She sat on her balcony for a while, looking at the potted plants. The basil was thriving, its leaves thick and fragrant. The sansevieria stood sturdy and unchanging, requiring almost nothing. She thought about what Attorney Ramon had said. Sometimes that is the best we can do. Putting the truth on record. That was what she had done. That was her revenge, if revenge was even the right word. Not a dramatic confrontation. Not public shaming. Not even the full restoration of what had been taken. Just a clear, documented record that said, "This happened. I did not consent. I did not disappear quietly." And maybe that was enough. Because the alternative was to let it go unrecorded, to let Hannah and David's version of the story become the only version. To let the narrative be that Maria and Leo had willingly handed over their life savings because they were old and confused and needed someone capable to take over. That version was a lie. And Maria had refused to let it stand. In March, Maria was cleaning out a drawer when she found the old notebook, the one she had started filling the day she discovered the emails. She flipped through it slowly, reading her own handwriting. The dates. The amounts. The quotes. The observations. It felt like reading someone else's life, even though she knew every word was hers. She thought about throwing it away. Burning it, maybe, or just tossing it in the trash. The case was filed. The evidence was submitted. She did not need the notebook anymore. But she kept it. She put it back in the fireproof box, next to the legal documents and the property titles. Because it was part of the record. Part of the story. And even if no one else ever read it, she wanted it to exist. By mid-year, Maria's life had found a rhythm. She had friends in the neighborhood, people she drank coffee with in the mornings, people who knew her as the quiet woman who lived alone and kept a tidy house and never complained. She did not tell them her story. Did not explain why she lived in Antipolo instead of with her family. Did not mention the court case or the missing money or the daughter-in-law who had dismantled her financial life. She was just Maria. And that was enough. David called her on her birthday in October. He did not apologize. Did not ask how she was managing. Just the usual pleasantries, brief and hollow. "Happy birthday, Ma." "Thank you. Are you doing okay?" "Yes." "And you?" "We are fine. Busy." "Good." Silence. "Okay, Ma. Take care." "You too." The call ended. Maria set the phone down and looked at the calendar on her wall. Another year. Another birthday. Another day of living with the consequences of choices made years ago. She was 60 years old now. And she was still here. Still managing. Still watering her plants and organizing her documents and choosing, every single day, not to let bitterness consume her. That, she thought, was the real victory. Not the court case. Not the professional reprimand. Not even the hope of recovering the money. The victory was in refusing to let what happened define her. In refusing to become the victim in her own story. She had been taken from. But she had not been erased. On a Sunday morning in November, Maria woke early and made coffee. She stood on her balcony and watched the sun come up over the hills, the light slowly spreading across the rooftops and the trees. Below, the street was quiet. A dog wandered past. A tricycle rattled by. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. She thought about the morning in October 2021 when she had first noticed Hannah collecting the mail. How small that moment had seemed. How easy it had been to explain it away as kindness. And she thought about all the other small moments that had followed. The questions about their finances. The volunteering to handle paperwork. the pushing for joint accounts and digital statements, the urgency that always seemed to benefit Hannah more than anyone else. The documents presented as routine when they were anything but. 7 red flags, she thought. 7 moments when she could have said no, could have asked more questions, could have insisted on understanding fully before agreeing. But she did not know what to look for. Had not had the language to name what was happening. Had trusted that family meant safety. Now she knew better. And if she could go back, she would tell herself one thing: read everything you sign. Trust is not the same as consent. And anyone who rushes you about money is not protecting you. But she could not go back. She could only move forward. So she finished her coffee, watered her plants, and got ready for Mass. She would go to the chapel, sit in the back pew, listen to the readings and the homily, and then she would come home and make lunch. She would spend the afternoon reading, maybe calling a friend, maybe just sitting on the balcony and watching the world go by. It was not the life she had planned. Not the life she had worked 33 years to build. But it was hers. And no one was going to take it from her again. She locked the door behind her, the key turning smoothly in the lock. She walked down the stairs, past the neighbor's door, past the potted plants on the landing, past the small store on the corner where the owner waved at her. The air was cool. The sky was clear. And Maria walked steadily, her steps certain, toward whatever came next. She no longer waited for apologies. No longer hoped for reconciliation. No longer counted the money that was gone. She simply walked. And that, she thought, was enough. Because the story was no longer about what had been taken from her. It was about what she had kept. Her dignity. Her clarity. Her refusal to disappear. And as she walked, the morning light falling gently on her shoulders, Maria felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. Every story here will stir your soul. Welcome to Spice and Sugar, your daily escape into real emotions, bold lives, and unforgettable lessons. Here, it's all about love, loss, laughter, and the quiet strength that carries us through. I share stories that make you feel, that remind you you're not alone, that every bitter moment can lead to something sweet. If you want to laugh, cry, and see life through stories that heal and inspire, subscribe and stay a while.